described herself as a short, fat, ugly piano player from Mississippi, which is a pretty good description. She could have added that she was a well-known... We'll get back to that. Meneghini called her the ugliest woman he'd ever seen. But she was a very successful columnist, and her column was widely read worldwide. And people wanted to be mentioned in her column. And she threw big parties, none of which she ever paid for. Because she was able to get celebrities to come to the party because they wanted to be written about positively. And so she got the idea to have a costume party in Venice for the daughter of Arturo Toscanini. And she knew that Maria Callas was a friend of Toscanini's daughter and probably would be on the list. So she thought, wouldn't it be interesting if she could get the two most famous Greeks in the world, Maria Callas and Aristotle Onassis, together? And sure enough, she was able to do that. There is Aristo greeting Maria. Now, what made Onassis famous? Well, to start with, he was a billionaire back when $1 billion was a lot of money. And he made this mostly in the shipping business. Supposed to be a very shrewd businessman. But he also was known as quite an entertainer of women, and very talented at doing that. And he had many followers. He said he learned how to please a woman in Buenos Aires when he was 23 years old. There was a prima donna there, interestingly enough, who was beautiful and in her 30s. And was known to be quite a lover. And Aristotle wanted to meet her. So he sent her 24 red roses with a note that he wanted to meet her. He said, "Who is this brash young man sending me these roses? Show him up." Well, he spent 3 days with her. And he said she taught him how to please a woman. He was an apt pupil. He was well equipped for the task. And he learned a lot of interesting things. Techniques such as how to lick between the toes like a cat. So he said. I never tried it, but... so he had quite this reputation, which made him attractive. He also had a dual personality, much like Callas, which he could change in a flash. He could be charming and extremely generous 1 minute, and the next minute, vindictive and ruthless. Maybe that's a Greek thing. I made a mention about it earlier. At any rate, they had the party, and they got along very well. Meneghini really didn't know what was going on because they spoke Greek to each other all night long. But obviously were having a good time. In fact, Maria was having a blast. She did something she never did. She sang informally in public. She once turned down Winston Churchill, who asked her to sing something. But here she is, with Elsa playing, singing Swanee River. I wish I could have been there. So the party was over, and I'm sure when they parted, they said they wanted to meet again. Now, it was at this time that Maria was scheduled to return to the Metropolitan Opera. But she was having difficulty with Rudolph Bing deciding what she should sing. She wanted to sing certain things, Bing wanted to sing other things. She also was very dissatisfied with the Met in that she never got a new production. She always got the old sets, worn out sets. She never seemed to get the best tenors or baritones to sing opposite her. She always seemed to have the house conductor, Fausto Clava, who could conduct anything but nothing particularly well. And she was not happy, so she failed to sign the contract. In the meantime, her friend Lawrence Kelly, who had been with the Chicago Opera, had gone to Dallas, Texas, to establish an opera company and a new civic center. And the opening of the civic center, which was in '57, He invited Callas to sing. And then he said, why don't you come back and sing in an opera in '58? She said, well, if it's the right opera, I'll do it. And she did. She sang Medea with a brand new production by our friend Franco Zeffirelli, with a terrific new young conductor, Thomas Shippers, and one of the finest tenors in the world, certainly the finest, Jason, John Vickers. And this upset Rudolph Bing substantially. Not only does she not sign with him, but she sings for in this cow town, is what he called Dallas, this cow town. And so the day that she was to open up in Medea, he put out a press release which said, Bing fires Callas. That night, things were pretty tense in Dallas. When Maria arrived, knew about all this press to sing the performance. And her friend Louis Rossigno, who was there, describes what happened. Well, there's another picture of the two of them at the party. Not too many pictures of Aristotle. One reason why he did all his business on the Christina, the yacht, was the paparazzi couldn't get to him. Smart fellow. So here is Rossigno talking about what happened in Dallas.
That night, she came to the theater looking like an empress. She wore a ermine thing that draped to the floor, and she had every piece of jewelry she ever owned. She said, you all know what's happened. Tonight, for me, is a very difficult night, and I will need the help of every one of you. Well, she proceeded to give a performance that was historical.
We have a clip of some of this historic performance. Remember, this is a very dramatic opera, but it shows how Callas really attacked that role that night. Some 20 years later, Rudolph Bing was interviewed on BBC about the firing. And it's interesting to hear what he had to say about it 20 years later. Here's Rudolph Bing.
Years ago, well, it was just a question. It was a decision, really. Does she run the Met or do I run the Met? And at that time, perhaps very wrongly, I felt that I was running the Met. And she made, I mean, obviously Callas was treated, kid glove is an understatement. Every wish she had, and they were usually reasonable, was fulfilled, but occasionally she became just intolerable. And there was an agreement, I don't remember the exact details now, but there was an agreement that she would do Lady Macbeth and Traviata. And obviously these are extremely different parts in their textures. And I arranged with her how many days she would need in between, and that was all arranged and all discussed. And then she suddenly said she wouldn't do Traviata. And in the meantime, she had gone to Dallas, Texas, I think, where she sang various performances. And I telephoned and answered letters and cables, and she didn't answer. Difficulty was her husband, who was very difficult in these matters. So eventually the moment came when I had to say, sorry, contract cancelled. Little did I know that everything disappeared from the front pages, and Bing fires Callas was just the news of the day. Was she that much more difficult than other artists? The answer is yes. And I think mainly because she was that much more intelligent. With most artists, you could argue, and if you, I mean, they were just, I wouldn't say they were stupid. I dealt with a great number of very intelligent artists, but eventually you could get them around, so to speak. Callas you couldn't get around. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she knew why she wanted it.
I think that's pretty interesting. Well, Medea was then taken to the Covent Garden by Zeffirelli, where it was a huge success. And Aristotle Onassis decided he'd like to see what this was all about. He was really not a fan of opera, but he'd heard so much about the Callas fans and the adulation, so he arrived in Covent Garden, London, for the performances, and was bowled over by the praise, the huge cheering of her fans, the many curtain calls. He decided he would invite Meneghini and Callas to a cruise on the Christina. And so that night, he invited them. Maria at first felt she didn't want to go. I think she might have sensed she was on a slippery slope. Meneghini said, "Oh, of course we'll come." You know, he wanted to have a contact with a big Italian businessman and might make it be a business deal for him. So they said they'd come. The party went on and on. Callas and Onassis discovered they both loved to tango. So they paid the orchestra and they played one tango after another. Meneghini got tired of that and went home. According to Onassis, at some 3 or 4 in the morning, he took Maria home in his limousine and she made love to him in the back of the car. So says Onassis, probably happened. So in the spring, this is 59, comes time to take the trip on the Christina. Christina was one of the largest yachts in the world, and Onassis used it more or less as his office. And we have a little clip here that'll give you some idea what it was.
The 22nd of July, Maria and her husband reach Monaco. They are about to set off for 3 weeks on Onassis's yacht, the Christina, the world's most luxurious boat. For Onassis, the Christina was an office, a home, and a showcase for his wealth. Each year, he followed the same recipe for a successful cruise, inviting prestigious guests like Winston Churchill, who was a regular for 6 years. Introduced by Tina, Onassis's wife, Churchill came accompanied by his wife, his entourage, and his parrot. A holiday break, a time of rest for these warriors. A cruise on the Aegean Sea, the first real holiday for Maria Callas.
On this cruise, Onassis was seen walking in port hand in hand with Maria. And Meneghini oftentimes stayed aboard the ship. Some of the paparazzi got pictures. There were pictures that appeared in the paper. The word got back to Meneghini that something might be going on. I might say there were several people on this cruise. Gianni Agnelli from Fiat was there. And this is Tina. This is Onassis's wife. Very pretty woman. He married her when she was a teenager. She didn't need his money. Her parents were very wealthy. And they had 2 children, Alexander and Christina, who the yacht had been named after. But when they returned, the friends of Meneghini said, you know, something's going on there, and Meneghini dismissed it as just a shipboard romance. Well, it was much more than that. Callas asked Meneghini for a divorce. Meneghini refused. Callas moved out of the house and filed for a separation in the Italian court. And then she went on a second cruise with Onassis. But this time it was just 3 passengers besides the crew: Onassis, his wife's sister, and Callas. By the end of the year, 59, Callas found that she was pregnant. Onassis arranged for Callas to go to Switzerland in a villa there. And this time they were able to keep it quiet so the paparazzi never learned about it. In fact, all this didn't come to light until some years later when an investigative reporter from the New York Times, Nicholas Cage, discovered a great deal of information about what was going on. Anyhow, Callas went there to have her child. Onassis took Winston Churchill and his wife on an extended cruise to the United States. Churchill wanted to renew friendships there. Came June of 1960, Callas was 9 months pregnant. Onassis was due back at any moment. She didn't want him to see her in her condition. She decided to have a cesarean birth, which she did. She gave birth to a boy who lived 2 hours and died. Nicholas Cage later discovered the birth certificate and the burial site. It was a great blow to Callas. Callas had always wanted to have a family. On more than one occasion, she had proposed to Meneghini that they have a family, and Meneghini always said, well, we can't afford the loss of salary. Wouldn't be able to sing for a year, and we can't afford it. So, and they say she always picked the wrong guy. 100%. So, at this point, Onassis is content to have Callas on the side, so to speak, and still maintain his marriage. He wanted to have a proper marriage with his children. And Callas was willing to put up with this. This went on for a while, and then a very unusual surprise happened. Tina decided she'd had enough of this, and she went to Alabama and got a quickie divorce. This really caught Onassis by surprise. And then she married Callas, Onassis' bitter Greek shipping rival. This was more than Onassis could take. Not only does his wife dump him, but then she marries that bum. He had to do something to retain his stature. But look, he's already got the most famous woman in the world in tow. What else could he do? Well, there's one other woman, and probably equally famous, the wife of the President of the United States. And as luck would have it, Jackie Kennedy lost a child, Patrick, in a premature childbirth in 1963. Her sister, Lee Radziwill, said, Jackie, you need a vacation. Why don't we call my friend Onassis? She'd been on board to Christina as his guest and entertained in the usual way many times. And she said, I think you'd enjoy it. It'd be a nice, restful thing to do. Jackie liked the idea. The president didn't. And her brother-in-law, Bobby Kennedy, was very much against it. There was bad blood between Bobby Kennedy and Onassis. It goes back to after World War II, when Onassis wanted to buy surplus tankers from the U.S. government, and the deal was blocked, and he thought that Bobby Kennedy was responsible for blocking the deal. As for Bobby Kennedy, he thought that Onassis had shipped oil to the communist Chinese. And also Onassis owed the United States tax money, which he refused to pay. So he was against it. But Jackie begged, and finally the president said, okay, but I'll send my friend Frank Roosevelt Jr. and his wife Sue to kind of keep an eye on things. And off they went on the cruise. I don't think Roosevelt did a very good job. I knew Frank, and I'd love to tell you some stories, but we haven't got time. I got to know him quite well. I was the first dealer he appointed as a distributor in the Southeast, and we did a lot of interesting things together. He's quite a ladies' man. But I met a gentleman here a few days ago who knew him very well and said that he knew what happened on the Christina. There was lots of free sauce on the boat, and Franklin liked the sauce, and he got into it and didn't keep a very good eye on what was going on. At any rate, Onassis bragged later on that he had made love to Jackie Kennedy when she was still the First Lady. And if that happened, it had to have happened on the Christina. In the middle of the cruise, Jackie Kennedy got a cable from the president saying he was going to go to Dallas, Texas to campaign, and he wanted her to come back. So he and Lee Radziwill left the Christina to go back. As a little souvenir of their trip, Onassis gave each of them a bracelet. Jackie Kennedy got a $50,000 ruby and diamond bracelet, and Radziwill got something of much lesser quality. Kind of upset about that, but she realized she wasn't the First Lady. Well, we know what happened. The president was shot and killed. Onassis heard about it, and he cabled Lee Radziwill and said, I want a ticket to the funeral, and I want to stay at the White House. Radziwill arranged that. And so Onassis was able to continue his friendship or association or relationship, whatever you want to call it, with the Kennedys. Callas was seeing Onassis whenever she could, but she felt it was time for her to get back on the stage. She had not sung an opera for 3 years, 60, 61, and 62. And it so happened that our friend Franco Zeffirelli was going to mount a new production of Tosca. And he was going to make it different in that the Tosca was not going to be played in the usual fashion, in the sort of grande dame kind of fashion, where Tosca comes out on the stage with a long train and the big hat with flowers. He wanted his Tosca to be a real woman with fire and passion, like a Greek woman, like Maria Callas, maybe. So he called on Maria and said, this is 63, I want to put this on, this Tosca. I want you to be the Tosca. And I've got Tito Gobi, the finest singing actor in the world, to sing opposite you. But he says, I see you haven't been practicing. She says, how do you know that? Well, he said, I know you always practice at the piano. Look at your fingernails. You haven't been at the piano in a long time. Well, she says, you're right. But I feel I'm ready to sing. And she was. The opera opened to great acclaim. She found in Tito Gobi a partner, you saw them earlier in some scenes from it, that was perfect for her, and they worked together very closely. They decided that they would continue with more performances after the first of the year. In January, Marie found herself pregnant again. This time Onassis said, look, this is not the time for us to have a child. The timing isn't right for me, the timing isn't right for you, and the timing certainly isn't right for the child. So Marie agreed to have an abortion. And in January, she went into a Paris hospital and had it done. When she came out, they did the Toscas. And they worked together very well. I mentioned to you earlier about Callas's acting abilities. And the fact that she did acting with very little gesture. She had very little gesture. Much of her acting was with her hands, or with her arms. You may recall Rudolph Bing said the curve of her arm when she rang the bells, spoke volumes. And just the movement of her hand did more to establish a character than the whole acts of singing by other people. Think back to the film we saw of Tosca, when she went to the table and brought up the water and slowly drank it, and then slowly put it down, and then she saw the knife. And what did she do? She put the glass on the table, and then she put her hand on top of the glass. A little thing, but it was a gesture of indecision. Should I do this? Can I do this? And this is classic Tosca acting. But she had great fun with Tito Gobi working on these things, and so why not hear it in Callas's and Gobi's own words? I think it's important I show you this first. This is after she's filed for the separation. The word is now in the presses all over the world. What's going on between Onassis and Callas? She was constantly pestered by the paparazzi, any place she went. And I've got so much stuff. I pulled this clip out to give you a feeling of what she was going through, being hounded by the press. And I think you can see in this little clip a little war going on within Callas. Remember we mentioned Callas was two people? She was Callas and she was Maria. The Callas side of her is saying, look, this is the press. It's important you have them on your side. Try to be nice to them. Answer their questions. The Maria side is saying, I wish these people just go away and leave me alone. And I think you see this battle going on in this clip. So let's just.
How do you feel about the court litigation that's coming up?
I'm giving no interviews. Do you mind, gentlemen?
Was Callas
Do you have any disagreement in Dallas?
I'm giving no interview.
Did you have any trouble in Dallas?
None at all. I'm giving no interview.
The only reason you
Why
left
did you cut short your trip?
Please.
Are you going to marry?
I said don't. I'm not answering any interview. Now stop it.
Dallas, does all this attention disturb you?
Gentlemen, I'm giving no interview, please. That's all.
Did you have any argument at all in Dallas? Is that why you cut short your engagement?
Don't be in search of any
What do you expect
scandal.
to do?
Please stop it. Go.
What do you expect to accomplish when you go to
I
Italy?
said, will you please stop it?
Miss Callas, you said you expect to sing, but you're not singing in Dallas. Can you tell us
I
the
said,
reason?
please stop it.
Look, gentlemen, it's very apparent she doesn't wish to talk with you. Let's move right along, please.
Look, Frank.
Take it easy, Mike.
Why not? When you're nice, I smile.
We try to
Try to be nice.
When you push me around, I don't like it.
Well, we don't mean to push you.
I wish you'd stand still so he wouldn't have to.
But I have to walk around.
Look, it's much harder for my cameraman than it is for you.
Why don't you
Well,
stop?
why did you make it suffer?
This trip in Italy will end this romantic squabble that everyone's been predicting.
This is no romantic squabble, it's a separation, that's all.
Have you talked to Mr. Onassis?
I talked to all my friends. I am answering no more questions. That's all, gentlemen.
Can't you see, remember that sound clip we had of her talking about the rum walkout, you were going to get on your knees? I'm sure that part of Maria was just trying to burst out there, yet she was trying to hold back because it was the press. I wanted to share that with you because I think it graphically captures a point. So let's get back to Tosca. And Maria and Tito Gobi talking about the things they do together to make Tosca very special.
For instance, you cope with a woman that really is,
This
if not
is it.
hysterical, nervous. So that is why she comes in and out, and she's anxious and a nuisance also, rather. And all she was really interested was in finding her Cavaradossi.
In these performances, the role of Scarpia was sung by the baritone many critics considered Callas's equal, Tito Gobbi.
With Maria, I was Scarpia and she was Tosca. And that is the difference. I have been singing this role with so many soprano, with all the soprano in my time, and everyone has a good interpretation. But Maria was never Maria, was Tosca on stage. One day, during a rehearsal, she was running towards Scarpia. She arrived to my chest and she started beating my chest, "L'Anniver, l'Anniver!" And so I catch her hands and I open her arm like this, like crucifying her. And that was a wonderful sensation. It was really like crucifying Tosca. And she asked me to do it again next performance.
Well, these two were great, as you can see. And so they decided to take the performance to New York, and Bing was very happy to have Callas back. The lines were very long. Many of those people, including Terrence McNally, had never seen Callas.
I was met at Kennedy Airport by cheering and adoring fans. The lines for standing room tickets formed 4 days before they went on sale. Over 1,000 people slept outside the Met box office.
Only for her would I do this. Nobody else. What's so great about her? She's the only star in opera today who has, real glamour. She's a real star in every sense of the word. She's a great actress. She's a great singer. She's a fabulous personality,
I think it's a shame that she hasn't been here, and now that she has agreed to come back, I think to miss her would be really a crime. This woman is undoubtedly the greatest singer of this century.
So she was a big hit in New York. Meantime, Jackie Kennedy was trying to decide what to do with her life. She was very much concerned about her safety and the safety of her children. She was very much concerned about her financial future. Aristotle Onassis made overtures to her that perhaps they should get married. It seemed like an attractive idea to her. She could move out of the United States and be safer for her children, provide for their security. So she asked Teddy Kennedy to investigate the possibility of a marriage and a prenuptial agreement. Bobby Kennedy got wind of this and said, "Please don't do anything. I'm running for the presidential nomination. And if we did something like this, it could cause a scandal. I could lose a few states." They were trying to preserve the illusion of Camelot. And so Jackie said she'd hold off. Well, we know what happened. First Martin Luther King was shot. That didn't help Jackie's nerves any. And then Bobby Kennedy was killed by a Palestinian terrorist. Now, we don't have time to talk about it, but there's a book called Nemesis that was published in 2004 by a very creditable investigative reporter in London that says that Aristotle Onassis actually arranged for the murder of Bobby Kennedy. And he did it for two reasons. One, he was working on the biggest deal of his life, which he called the biggest deal, Project Omega, to build a refinery in Athens, Greece, to ship Russian oil. And he also was, and he thought if Bobby Kennedy became the president, he would see that the Greek government never allowed that. And he also wanted to marry Jackie, and he knew Bobby was against that. So he had two reasons to do it. Whether it happened or not, read the book, and you can decide for yourself. But at any rate, with Bobby Kennedy out of the way, they got married. And there was a few photographs taken. The people who were there said it seemed more like a business deal than a marriage. They said that John, Jackie's son, spent most of the time looking down at the floor. Well, for a while, things to go pretty well. Alexander, who was Onassis' son, took a rather philosophical attitude towards it. He said, my father likes names, and Jackie likes money. So they'll probably get along pretty well together. And things went along well for a while, but then, and incidentally, it was a very easy arrangement. Jackie could come and go as she'd like. She wanted to go to Paris or London or New York or whatever. She was allowed to do that, and she had a very large clothing allowance, which she wanted. She seemed to get all the things that she wanted. But Onassis finally decided that this was a bad deal. He said, what does she do with all these clothes she buys? I never see her in anything but blue jeans. Well, what she was doing, she was shipping them back to New York to two high-fashion used clothing outlets and converting it into cash. Smart lady. And Onassis said that making love to Jackie Kennedy was like making love to a corpse. So things were not going very well. Onassis started telephoning Maria Callas. She wouldn't answer the phone. He kept calling. She finally answered the phone. He went to see her. She wouldn't let him in. He returned. He parked his Rolls Royce outside her apartment and shouted through the door, "Let me in or I'll drive the Rolls right through the front door of the apartment." Marie knew he would do that, so she let him in. And they started going out together, even being photographed together. There's a wonderful picture taken in Maxims. I don't know the caption, but I think Onassis here is sort of making fun of the fact he doesn't want to be seen with Maria. After this photograph was published, Jackie Kennedy called Onassis and said, "I want to have dinner with you tomorrow night at Maxims." She flew over to Paris and had a picture taken at the same table. I mean, these people are living in another world. So things were not going well there. And then Onassis' fortune started to change. The sailors aboard the Christina called it the Jackie Jinx. He had gone 30 years losing one ship, and he lost 3 ships in 1 year, including one that Maria Callas owned a 50% interest in. His business deals were going sour. Olympic Airlines was nearing bankruptcy. It was his pet airlines. He owned it. He finally gave it to the Greek government. And then the cruelest blow of all, his son Alexander died flying a plane in a takeoff. Onassis thought it probably was sabotage, but he never could prove anything. And he would spend nights sitting at his son's tomb weeping. And his health started to deteriorate. Meantime, Callas wants to do something. She had sung her last performance of Tosca in London. After her triumph in New York, she came back and Zeffirelli decided they should do some Normas. It was a couple of pictures ago, you saw a picture of Norma. She did these Normas, and she arranged to do 5 of them. And the first 2 went very well. The third one was okay, and the last 2 were near disasters. One of them was when her voice broke. Remember, I told you that Bing was there. And so she knew her career was pretty much at an end, but she had agreed to do 4 Toscas in Covent Garden. She canceled the first 3. But the 4th one, the Queen of England was going to be there. Possibly thinking back to the Rome walkout, she felt maybe she should try to sing for the Queen. She did. It was a disaster. She did not know that that would be her last operatic performance, which was 1965. But, so her singing career is over. She's got to do something. What can Callas do? Well, there was the movies. Onassis wanted her to get involved in the movies. And she was approached by Roberto Rossellini to do a film of Medea. It seemed like a very good subject for her. And they did this film. I'll show you a little clip of it. You can't take more than this clip because this is really, at best, a B-rated film, but this is what came out of it. There's nothing really subtle about this film.
Perché cerchi di passare attraverso il fuoco? Non potrei farlo! È inutile tentare! Se vuoi parlarmi puoi farlo, ma senza avermi vicino né toccarmi!
Che cosa hai fatto? Che cosa hai fatto? Non soffri anche tu come me ora!
Perché tu non arriva, io voglio soffrire!
Quel tuo stesso Dio ti condannerà, basta!
Sì, basta, e che cosa vuoi da me?
Lasciami seppellire i figli e piangerli!
Torna piuttosto a seppellire la tua sposa!
Sì, ci andrò, ma senza i miei 2 bambini!
È inutile! È inutile! Niente è più possibile ormai!
No, movies were not the answer. So then she tried master classes at Juilliard, which were very well attended, but really nothing came out of that. Finally, she directed a opera with Giuseppe Di Stefano, and that didn't work. She was then approached by Giuseppe Di Stefano to take a tour, a 28-city tour. And at first she said no, but finally she decided, what have I got to lose? Maybe my voice will come back. They did a 28-city tour in 3 continents, winding up in Japan. It was a financial success. People turned out and cheered because many of them never heard Callas or Di Stefano sing before. Artistically, it was a disaster. Di Stefano's voice was in worse shape than Callas. It's interesting, just before they left on this tour, Onassis contacted Callas and said that he had hired Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn, the lawyer in New York, you may remember, see some of you nodding your heads, you may remember him, young lawyer, to negotiate a divorce with Jackie Kennedy. And he approached Callas with the idea of a divorce. He thought she had renounced her American citizenship and become a Greek citizen because she heard that in Greece, if you weren't married in the church, you were never married. And she was married by a justice of the peace. But, that didn't work. But anyhow, Onassis said, I think I can arrange it. This was the time that Marie was to say no. Instead, she went off with Giuseppe Di Stefano. And in the process, they became lovers. When they came back, a friend of hers said, why don't you go to Palm Beach? I think you'd like Palm Beach. So she came to Palm Beach and lived here for 4 or 5 months. She rented the house. She had option to buy it, almost bought it. It's a beautiful house. It's a Mediterranean house. And I can see how Maria would be very much at home there. Some of you might have been in that house. Dr. John Welton and his wife live there now. Somebody says, aha, yeah. It's a beautiful house. But Onassis, in the meantime, his health was getting worse and worse. Maria wanted to go to see him. She knew that he was going to die, and he knew it. Jackie Kennedy had arranged guards so that nobody could see him. She managed to slip by the guards one time when Jackie was in Paris to get in to see Onassis, who couldn't speak, but he felt she could understand her, and she told him in Greek that she loved him. And then he died. This left Marie alone in Paris, virtually a recluse. She had taken pills to try to calm her nerves back when We saw her, you know, being very nervous coming out on the stage, and so she was sort of a pill taker. She also was starting to take a drug that was legal in Greece but illegal in France, and her mother and her sister sent her that drug. Years later, Giuseppe, an aging Giuseppe Di Stefano, being interviewed by Tony Palmer, had this to say about what was going on during these days in Paris, with Marie living pretty much by herself.
Maria Callas, through her life, showed that you can be the most successful person in your field. But still, the most important thing is love, passion. So every woman who is a passionate woman feels sympathy for this for Maria Callas, because they realize that there's all this success means very little. The most important thing is love. After such immense success, she was crying. She said, I was horrible, I was no good. The kind of artist who was never happy. People like this, they cannot hope and they suffer. Then they don't want to show it, and they take pills. These pills were damaging the brain. She was taking 3 pills, then later she forgot she took 3 pills, and she took another 3. She was falling on the floor like a... She didn't want to fight anymore. She was going to taking these sleeping pills and waiting for death. First word, when I met in '72, she said, caro Pippo, ogni giorno, per fortuna, un giorno di meno. Every day, thank God, is one day less.
sings Visa d'arte, Visa d'amore. I've lived for art, I've lived for love. And it was at this point her art was gone with her voice and her lover was dead. But she was not completely, as De Stefano describes her. She did not lose all of her determination, nor her feistiness. As a matter of fact, she rented a little theater in Montmartre and started rehearsing Traviata. She thought she might have one Traviata left in her. Unfortunately, the paparazzi discovered it and blew the cover. And then it was proposed that she sing A Merry Widow. They thought she could handle the voice and she'd be a great actress. Her response was, Callas sing musical comedy? No. And then a friend of hers took her to a concert with the French conductor, that's his name for the moment, conducting. And she said to her friend, whispered to her friend, listen to how poorly they are playing. Don't they know that Callas is in the audience? But it was too little and too late. There she is, alone in her apartment. And here are her ashes, after she died and was cremated, being thrown into the Aegean Sea by the Greek Navy. And so we come to the end of the story of Maria Callas. And the story of Maria Callas, and for that matter, Aristo Onassis, has many elements of classical Greek tragedy. In classical Greek tragedy, a person of prominence, a king, a prima donna, a billionaire, rises to a point of great success and falls to a point of great failure. And both the rise and the demise are impacted by a tragic flaw in their character. In this case, Onassis and Callas shared a common tragic flaw. And it's a Greek word, hubris, which means arrogance. But whereas Onassis left us nothing for the time that he stayed here on this earth, Callas has left us a treasure trove of recordings that will continue to entertain and to educate opera lovers and would-be opera singers for a long time to come. Tito Gobi put it this way.
I'm sure Callas will remain in the history for a long, long time. In 100 years, people will still talk about Maria Callas as a beautiful and unique star which was crossing the sky of opera for a rather short time, but giving light forever.
And her biographer wrote this about her. Callas was a phenomena of her own making, a force in the world of opera. Her career was relatively brief, but its impact was lasting. She was that rare opera singer who connects with an audience on an emotional level. She brought the women she portrayed to life. Norma, Tosca, Violetta. Although their voices might have been technically better, no other opera singer of the 20th century spoke to people as she did. She changed opera, opened its heart, revealed its deepest meaning, and her imprint will remain. Listening to Callas in any one of the many dozens of recordings she made is like opening a window and letting light enter your room. Life has many imperfections, and so did Maria, the woman, but life goes on. It survives, and so will Callas. Unforgettable, distinctive, the prima donna assoluta forever. Now, as a final touch, Maria Callas is with us here this afternoon to say a very brief but a very passionate goodbye, addio, to all of us. If you close your eyes and listen carefully, some of you might actually see her.
Oh!
Thank you for coming tonight.